Don King, Hall of Fame inductee. Don has promoted more than 500 quote-unquote world title fights. Nearly 100 fighters have earned at least $1 million in fights that Don has promoted. Selected by the New York Times as one of the most influential Afro-Americans of the 20th century. So now let's break down some of the great fights and achievements that Don has blessed us with over the years. No better place to start than the Rumble in the Jungle, which has become more than a boxing event. The first heavyweight title bout to be staged in Africa, between two African Americans at the peak of their powers. The Thriller in Manila is said to be the best boxing contest in the history of the fight game. And that's being said by the harshest and toughest of critics. 1 billion people saw that fight worldwide on television. Don King is the first promoter to guarantee a fighter a $10 million purse, the fighter in hand being Sugar Ray Leonard, and that was for the fight against Roberto Duran. Don also holds the record for the largest in-person paid attendance, which is 132,244 people, which consisted of a 4-fight card, all world title fights, headed by Julio Cesar Chavez and Greg Haugen, breaking the previous record set by Tex Rickard with the first Dempsey and Tunney fight. King is also the first boxing promoter to establish his own TV network, the Don King Sports and Entertainment Network, in 1982. He was also the organ grinder behind the 1986 heavyweight boxing tournament, which saw Tyson come out as the undisputed champion. He also oversaw the middleweight tournament in 2001, which saw Bernard Hopkins emerge victorious, knocking out Felix Trinidad. He's also responsible for Tyson Holyfield 1 and 2, Cooney versus Holmes, Tyson versus Spinks, Salvador Sanchez versus Wilfredo Gomez, which was the first time two featherweights were each guaranteed $1 million purse. One of the rare moments when Bob Arum and Don King put the egos aside and shared a joint promotion was the Julio Cesar Chavez Oscar De La Hoya title bout. Now I want to keep the video moving along quickly. If you want to see the rest of the great fights that Don King has promoted, you can Wikipedia it or box rec it yourself. Trust me, you're going to have a very long day. Now, Bob Arum is no slouch. He is also a Hall of Fame inductee. He worked as an attorney before turning his hand at boxing promoting in the mid-60s. He is the CEO of Top Rank Promotions. His acumen in business helped him become a major force in the boxing game. Top Rank has now promoted near enough 11,500 fight cards worldwide. Arum has also had his hand in promoting a few big Ali fights too, like the fights against George Chuvalo, Henry Cooper, Cleveland Williams, and Ernie Terrell. Not to mention the 2 fights that Ali had with Leon Spinks, although some sources say that Arum is only attributed to promoting the second fight. He also used to promote Floyd Mayweather before Floyd found his independence and became his own man. He promotes Manny Pacquiao, who is probably the most popular fighter in the game. Not in my opinion the pound-for-pound best, but opinions are opinions. He also staged fights like Pryor-Aguero, both fights, Hagler versus Hearns, Duran versus Hagler, Hagler versus Mugabe, Hagler versus Leonard. Hagler's apparently in a lot of super fights, but you know how Hagler does. He also promoted Holyfield versus Foreman, Foreman versus Mora, De La Hoya versus Mosley. And that's just a small sample. And like I say, if you want to see the extensive history of the fights Bob's promoted, the websites are out there. Bob, ESPN, Top Rank have managed to turn over millions and make the likes of Oscar De La Hoya and Manny Pacquiao some of the highest paid sports stars in the history of sport. Can't doubt that. Cannot doubt that. And Bob is still doing his thing today, while admittedly, King is no longer the force he once was. Both men have both put on great main events. But when you've had the Rumble in the Jungle and the Thriller in Manila, that automatically makes you hard to displace. Bob had the middleweight tournaments, the heavyweight tournaments, And just like Lou DiBella's brilliant Super Six, where the equally brilliant Andre Ward emerged as the undisputed champion, the blueprint was laid out what Don laid. Don always wanted to put on more unification tournaments, but the television networks and the alphabet boxing bodies are never keen to cooperate with that, because the more bogus title fights, the more payola. Now, as I stated, Arum's track record in main events cannot be put into doubt. But the last few times I've been to the snooker club to watch Manny Pacquiao's pay-per-view events, the undercards have not been that impressive. Bob does tend to cheap out on the undercards. And it makes me think back to the 90s. King was putting on cards like Simon Brown versus Maurice Blocker, Chavez versus Duplessis, Tyson versus Ruddock. That's one card. Then you get Nelson versus Fenech, Tyson versus Ruddock. That's one card. Nelson versus Fenech. That's big fights, man. That's big fights. Tyson versus Ruddock, big fights. Then on another card, you'd have Chavez versus Haugen, Terry Norris versus Maurice Blocker, Azuma Nelson versus Rules, Michael Nunn versus Dan Morgan. 4 world title fights on one card. Another card, Julian Jackson versus Gerald McClellan. And on that same card, you got Chavez versus Terrence Ali, Lennox Lewis versus Tony Tucker. Another card, Chavez versus Whitaker, Nelson versus Leja. 2 big world title fights. Another card, Chavez versus Randall, Trinidad versus Hector Camacho, Simon Brown versus Troy Waters. 3 world title fights. I could go on and on and on, and on and on. Last year, Arum matched Pacquiao with Marquez. On the undercard, we had Timothy Bradley defending his WBO strap against Casamaya. Fair enough, it was a world title fight. But before even a punch was thrown, people on websites, on different forums, on YouTube, were all asking, why is Bradley defending against Casamaya? And then to throw salt in the wound, Casamaya comes up positive for having the kush in his system. It might look like I'm beating up on Bob, but so what? This is my channel. And I'm not going to deny who I'm rooting for, but I feel I've been objective. I feel I've been informative from a historical and a modern day standpoint as I can. And the scorecards are in. The winner and the greatest promoter of all time is... I'll let you decide it in the comment box. Peace out.